Hi, friends. You are listening to the EntreEd Talk podcast, where we feature amazing educators and entrepreneurs showcasing how you can bring entrepreneurship into the classroom. We believe entrepreneurship is for everyone. I am your host, Toy Hirschman, and I am so glad you chose to join me on this journey. Let's go. Okay, friends, welcome back to another fun-filled episode of the EntreEd Talk podcast. I'm your host, Toy Hirschman, and I am so excited to have with me Elyse and Christen Dunn from Real World Scholars. They are going to share all about their initiatives, their programs, and all the cool things that they're doing for students and entrepreneurship. This is really exciting. We had Christen on, it seems like eons ago. I think we decided it was number 5. And so this is really exciting to have her back and to have Elyse on as well. So welcome to you both. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you, Toy. This is my first time, my inaugural. So I'm excited to be able to join the conversation.
Great. So why don't we just kick it off and let you both share about Real World Scholars, what that is, what that's all about. I know people who listened back in episode 5 might know, but we're going to kind of start fresh because that was a while ago. And then also even your own personal journeys from how you got to land at this place that you are at today.
Sure. And I can get started and pass the baton, Christen. It's wild because I feel like we are still always in startup mode as an entrepreneurial organization. And so on the one hand, I'm like, oh, we're a startup. And on the other hand, we got started in 2014. So, we're about to be 8 years old. And the goal for us was always how to put money in the hands of students to practice entrepreneurship, to have the real lived experience of being able to create something and take it out into the world, to interact with human beings. And so, back in 2015, we were able to develop an e-commerce platform that allowed any K-12 class around the country to run a student-run business directly, either from their classroom or an after-school setting. It was really about bringing young people together and creating kind of a rich learning experience that was entrepreneurial, but maybe connected to other things that were happening in their classroom, which is one of the reasons the platform is so flexible. It supports chemistry classes and second grade art projects, right? So to date, we've supported a little over 550 student-run businesses, and it's hard to keep track of all of the fun stories because I feel like we're consistently just blown away by the creativity, whether it's 3D printed orthotics or bird boxes or, students who are in their community and brokering partnerships and starting their own podcasts. There is so much diversity in what students are doing in our community. And so that's been our to date, and we kind of continue to get to have conversations with educators and folks around the country around like what this looks like for them. But Christen joined our team about 4 years ago. Is that right, Christen? Am I making that number up?
I think 3.5 maybe now. Yeah, something like that. Close enough.
Time isn't real anymore.
It's irrelevant.
It really is.
I mean, I think Kristen's been amazing on our team because we've seen a bunch of communities pop up around the country, which is groups of educators who are, building businesses in their classrooms. The strongest community I would probably say we have, or one of the strongest, is our Pittsburgh community. And that's been in part because of Kristen's contribution. So I will let Christen kind of introduce herself.
Well, hello. So I work in the Pittsburgh region, but really helping out Real World Scholars as much as I can as well, and other programmatic efforts. And it's been great to see this entrepreneurial community come alive among the K-12 students here. We have had anywhere from 20 to 40 teachers every year in the Pittsburgh region, Southwest PA, really kind of western part of PA, all the way up north down to the south is really where we've been located. But and it's been fun to see all the teachers and students grab onto the EdCorps platform and do real entrepreneurship. Because my background was I had spent many years in business, owned my own stores and things like that, and then went into education, got my degree, and became an entrepreneur educator. But one of the things I found was within classes, usually there isn't room for real startups. There's room for book learning and simulated activities in entrepreneurship. But it really came to me after about my second year of teaching it. Gee, I wish they could do this for real. And that's when I found Real World Scholars and the EdCorps platform. And it just was like a light bulb went off in my head, and how cool this is that we could be doing real work with students today to get the career skills and everything that they need to develop for their future, and rather than waiting, for someday for them to do something great. So that's been fun to be on this journey with EdCorps and to see that kind of work happening out there.
That is so awesome. So this is a loaded question because of because of what I do for a living too. So why is it important for students to have a real, actual business entrepreneurial experience opposed to a simulation or something else?
That's why it is hard to answer that question with the brevity required for a podcast, right? I think enthusiastic argument around why experiential learning is superior to the alternative. There is nothing wrong. I love books. My house is full of books. I love to learn about things, but the reality is and I can't remember, someone gave me this example recently, but if you're going to learn to fix bikes, you're not going to learn it from a book. You're going to have to start working on bikes, right? And one of my favorite, there's something transformative that happens when you're actually involved in creating something and sharing it with the world. And while I think some of these programs that walk students through the ideation process can really stoke creativity and imagination, and they can start to think critically about that process, they never have the opportunity to actually take it out into the world. Not only do they have that moment of that spark of connection, but then that spark of risk, of vulnerability, of authentic learning when someone says, you know what, I have a different take on this, or this is my feedback. And a lot of our classes have had those moments of like a customer not being pleased or them screwing up an order and having that oh gosh, what do we do? Well, now we learn, we lean in, right? And you'll never have opportunities if you don't ever take the chance to kind of put your work out there. And so one of my favorite quotes is from a student. In our first year, we were really involved in the classroom. And by we, I mean I was really involved. It was just my co-founder and I. And so we did some student surveying, and there was a kid who really, he spoke to me because he was so irreverent. He was just like one of those kids who had such a fire, and he was so challenging, but I loved the fire. And I remember asking, what is running a student-owned business done for your classroom experience? And he said, well, before I didn't give a damn about my work, but now that people are actually paying me a lot of money for it, I actually have to try hard. And I don't think you can have that experience where you say, oh, wait, this actually matters. You can't have that experience unless, we can make it real. And I think that's what we see in the classrooms, even teachers who aren't necessarily trying to teach traditional entrepreneurship. They see that the entrepreneurial process makes the learning real and authentic.
Yeah, that's our we're singing to the choir thing, as that's our motto too. We know how important that is, because when it's relevant to them and they own it, it changes the game. And I don't care what course, what class, what subject area you want to put this into. It is such a game changer for students, and just brings that content even alive for them, which is such a cool thing. So if I'm a teacher, let's say I'm an 8th grade algebra teacher, and I find real world scholars, and I'm like, I really want to do this. So what would I do? What would be my next step?
You would go to our website, realworldscholars.org, and you can poke around. There are some pathways that say click here if you're a teacher, but you can also go directly to the EdCorps page, and that's where you can kind of learn more about what other classes are doing and what's been, some really cool case studies. And there's also an apply button. You can submit an application. We usually have grant funds to give away. We're still working on that for this upcoming year. But typically we give away micro grants to our teachers of varying amounts to get the classroom started. And so teachers can apply to be a part of that pool. We also have classes at districts that have the funds to pay for programming. And so if classrooms find themselves in one of those districts, or maybe at a school that has that kind of flexibility, or an after school program that has flexibility, they can also sign up for they can just sign up for the program, right? We do licenses as well. So you can just start by our website and navigate from there. I think it's all there. I hope.
Pretty sure it is. I was poking around.
That was the plan. I put it there.
So let's say I apply and I get a micro grant, and then do you guys, would you help me figure out, because like I love this idea, but I have no idea what to do about it.
Right, right, right. I mean, we try to plug our teachers in right away into our community. We have coaching. All of our materials are set up to be self-guided plus student-facing as well. So there's guidance from the teacher on the side, but it's really the experiential learning on behalf of the students to run through. But in terms of our community across the nation, we have fantastic teachers, many educators who have been with us year after year, many new ones coming in, and they connect, and we host connection opportunities that have been online then the last couple of years. And just has been amazing to us how much this peer-to-peer association happens, and being able to guide each other through, because each ed corp is really unique. There isn't really a prescribed way of running an ed corp, because it runs in a variety of classrooms or after school situations. It runs with 5 students. It runs with 125 students. Like, each ed corp is really unique in that way. One of the things we did last summer was we worked with some of our educators in co-creating playlists and play books that helped teachers. It kind of gave best practices and tips of how to run an ed corp in a club, or how to run an ed corp with over 100 students, or, in these different situations. We had about 5 or 6 different situations. So that guides a teacher through as well at first on how to get started. The first year teacher is usually a little timid. It's something new to kind of let go of control and let students have an experience and grab onto that experience and run this business. It's not easy for a lot of educators to let go of that control, but we know from all of our teachers and response and feedback that that's one of the most critical growth areas for them as an educator, is really putting things into students' hands and seeing what they can do with it. And I don't know, Elyse, if you have anything you want to add to that.
Well, I think it's funny. It's funny to reflect on the journey, because when we first got started, my co-founder and I, we really kind of come from an entrepreneurial background. And so, the whole idea is like, there's no playbook, there's no one size fits all. So, and we thought that was going to be empowering for educators. Like, we're not going to tell you what to do. We're not teachers, and by year 2 or 3 of like all the teachers looking at us and saying, no, but please help us with what to do. We don't know what we're doing. We're not entrepreneurship teachers. And the goal was really to build something that could work in any classroom context. You didn't have to be an entrepreneurship teacher, who is running a fully outfitted business. We wanted it to be flexible, but then we realized that meant that our educators were going to need a lot more support. And kind of to Christen's point, we found organically that they were finding a lot of support in one another. And so we really try to cultivate that peer-to-peer, the community events, community created resources. We've created some program resources that kind of walk students through the process a bit more, and it's been challenging to find that balance of, entrepreneurship not being highly prescriptive, but also giving them some bits and pieces of what could be a roadmap, and so we launched a few years ago these EdCorps toolkits, which are just, experiential 5-step toolkits that walk them through how to create a business card, how to choose your product, how to choose your name. And each of those toolkits have them connecting with someone in the community. And at the end of that toolkit, they have something tangible to move their business forward. And like Christen said, they're all student facing. And so it was things like that actually started to give the program more structure and more meat for teachers to work with, so that, students could build their business, but they weren't totally, shooting in the dark. And so we continue to evolve our resources, but we're always trying to figure out, what do educators need to do this work? Because we don't want to make it so challenging or such an exceptional experience that that it either leads to burnout, or it's only the few percent who can make it happen.
Yeah, that's wonderful. We have a similar experience, because we do a lot of professional development, and we don't force a curriculum. We want you to bring entrepreneurship into the classroom, whether it's some way that you come up with, or whether it's through real world scouts, whatever it is. But we always find that usually at the end of the training, okay, I'm glad you're not giving me a curriculum, but is there something I can use to help get started? So we find that it's kind of a funny, of similarity. So what, as far as teacher engagement, what are some challenges that you've had And you can even include this past year as a big challenge.
I mean, I know Christen could speak to this better than I could because she works more directly with some of our teachers. But I think the reality is for the last 18 months or however long it's been, educators have been beyond their threshold. And we talk about and have kind of normalized in our society talking about how overworked educators are to begin with, take on so much. Well, that volume got just turned up to the max. And so we were hearing from our teachers. Well, first we weren't hearing from our teachers. And when we did hear from them, it was this like, I'm so sorry, I've been totally underwater. And then second, there was just so much like grief and shame. People were so bummed that they felt like they should have been showing up better. We're so sorry we haven't been in communication. I really felt like our teachers, and I think this really speaks to how seriously our community takes their jobs. But, when they were looking around, having so many more things put on their plate and feeling like they should be able to hold them all better and feeling like they needed to be in communication with us. We tried as much as possible to let our educators know that we were going to be here, that we weren't going anywhere. And it was okay that they weren't responding to the emails. And so I think that's been a real challenge. But over time, throughout that, while they weren't responding to kind of important programmatic emails, they were showing up to these online meetups and more than ever and staying hours longer. And it was this wild phenomenon where they were so strapped for time and energy and bandwidth, but actually when they had opportunities to connect with each other in these small settings, they were loving it. They were so desperate for just that connection, that support, and for to have other educators near to them, that they were not alone in how hard this year had been. And so it was really a beautiful year in that way for our community, where we got to form different kind of relationships. We got to have really honest conversations. We had more meetups that just had no programming. It was just a coffee day, come check in with us and tell us how you're doing. And people really took advantage of that. And so I think that has been both a challenge and a growth point. We just kind of had to think about our relationships with our teachers a little bit differently to meet them where they're at.
Yeah, we had, it was a difficult year during the pandemic, as we all know, and Elyse really, structured that so well that even among this year, though, that human connection, and it just reminded us too, the entrepreneurial spirit is so based in human connection and human needs. And so that was lovely to see. We did end up deferring a lot of teachers to this school year. So that's exciting that we have, teachers back in action, but the teachers who did stick it out last year, the brave ones who were this may be a pandemic year, but you know what? We're going to go, because what they ended up seeing and the stories we got out of the year were that in this time where students were shuffled back and forth between home and hybrid situations and the learning and just everything was just complicated last year for them, we found that the Ed Corps who did show up and who continued and persevered just had these incredible years where they learned perseverance and the adaptability and the resiliency that was needed to continue in small business and to continue doing what they were doing. And the engagement was there and the transformation for the students was there. And we were able to see that even in hard times, things do persevere.
That's wonderful. I'm glad some were able to do it. It's been a just terrible time for everybody, with from teachers to parents to kids. I just hope that we're on a better path for this year coming up. So, oh my goodness. So can you explain or share what a student experience is like? I know there's probably not a typical one. It's probably because the way when we deal with schools, every school is different, every group is different, but what might Ed Corp look like from a student's perspective?
I can take a stab at this, and Christen, I'll be curious what you add. And Toy, you're right. It looks so different in every class. We have some classes where the teachers roles are assigned by an interview process, in which case a student might be introduced into the class and the teacher might say, this is what we have going on. This is a 2-year business, and these are the opportunities for you to get plugged in, the COO role, the CEO role. They may learn about the business and learn about the ways or teams that they may, be involved in. Other times, and then, sorry, I could have finished that thought. There's typically, we've had several teachers do, interview processes, applications, and that's, then students have the opportunity to kind of learn about what that process looks like, to have to present themselves, to put together a resume. Other classes will get started in a more organic way. Well, maybe they'll come up with their idea and then they'll say, what kind of teams do we need? Do we need a social media team? Do we need a production team? And in a similar fashion, students have the opportunity to explore those ideas, those kind of activities, to see where they might be interested, where they fit. And then hopefully they get plugged into one of those teams. One of our toolkits is around students creating teams and figuring out, where their interests may lie. And so the hope is, over the course of the year, that they have an opportunity to contribute to the business as a whole, whether it's selling events and group conversations, but that they also have the opportunity to dive in on something that they're particularly interested in, whether they got it from organic group formations or from a teacher interview process. They have something that they can latch onto, maybe as the chief of marketing, and learn about. And we have a great class in California, and the students keep weekly blogs. And it is a real stream of consciousness situation, which is delightful to hear about how they're thinking about their roles. And, I read some of them this summer, and they're reflecting on, well, what types of roles might I fit for? Well, my friends say this about me, so I might be good at this. And I'm thinking I'm going to prepare my application, and so I think it's oftentimes a personal exploration for them all to think about what they're good at, where they find purpose, how they can get plugged in and create value. And then often have the opportunity to do different versions of that, right? Because sometimes it's not a great fit, and students realize, actually, I hate marketing. Can I try on something else? And then they get the opportunity to try on a different, activity, a different skill set, and see if that brings them a bit more alignment, joy, purpose. And so, Christen, I'd be curious, what do you have to add to that?
I think my favorite ones are when the teachers come to us and say, I'm trying to do this step by step and think through this, and we've got the toolkits, and I'm trying to figure out which ones we'll go and tackle. But my students they want to do this. They've thought of this product, and this is what they want to do, but I'm trying to get them to do all this other stuff to learn first. I'm like, it's okay. Take a step back. If your students are raring to go, let them go. This is the learning experience, and there is no prescribed method, and our toolkits are there for you to use as a resource, not a requirement. So surely you can let your students go, let them run with this and enjoy this process. When they get stuck, when they need resources, the curricular resources are there for them. So I love those stories. My other favorite stories are, at the end of the year or throughout the year, we'll hear from educators who tell us stories of transformation. Maybe there was a selling event, or maybe there was an opportunity where they got to speak out in public, or have a mentor come into the classroom, or Zoom into the classroom these days, and just hearing the students transform, in their own voice. Well, I thought this, and now I think this, or now I wasn't able to talk to people at the beginning of the year. Now I'm able to talk to strangers, or to people that we're doing business with, and they come out of their shell. Those are my favorite stories of what the students experience through all this.
I love that. I feel like they're also finding a love of learning that they probably some of them may not have had before, because they're so used to this, they're not used to learning organically like that. Like, you learning because you're going to fail at something at some point in the process. Something's going to be, maybe not fail's the kind of a strong word, but you're going to have challenges throughout the entire process, and you're going to have to tackle them. And there's no, right or wrong answer. And
one of my favorite teachers in Ohio that has been with us for a while, I love the way he put it. He said, students will work harder to make a customer happy than they will for an A, and they'll learn authentically through that process. So that's always one of my favorite quotes.
That's so true, because they're actually, but there's a human, again, component to it, where they don't want to disappoint that person. And it's a really good point. So Elyse, as a founder, what is something that you wish you would have known in 2014 that you know now?
Boy, we don't have time.
That's a long list.
It's a long list.
What's the funniest one?
The funniest one, I mean, I think Easy does it. I think especially in the innovation space, and I say that kind of with like bunny ears, there is often this compulsion to go fast. And we went fast. We spent about 18 months in R&D talking to educators about like what could work, what could be interesting. And where we first actually started was asking, does this exist somewhere? So every, educator that we found an article about someone running a business, like, my co-founder would call them and like, how are you doing this? How are you pulling this off? And for those 18 months, we found teachers who were doing versions of it and we were really interested in it, but we couldn't find anyone who would take our money to run a business. We put a press release out for, I think it was like $500,000 maybe. And no one took the offer because people are like, what are you talking about? Like running a business in my classroom, And so eventually we figure, and this was after like 8 bad ideas, like an e-commerce platform that would allow us to host all of the banking, which like eases the liability for the educators, and then any class anywhere can connect. You can be in a really rural space and reach customers everywhere. You don't have to haul a bunch of stuff on your back to the farmer's market. Like it solved a lot of the problems. And so we went from having a bunch of bad ideas that no one would pick up on to a kind of maybe good idea that immediately exploded. And we went from 10 educators in September to 40 educators by April to 250 educators 6 months later. And that first year, like everyone had my number on speed dial. We were really involved with the classrooms, and that's doable at 10 and 20 classrooms. That's not doable at 250. And it took, at that point in time, though, the train was on the track and we carried about 250 teachers for the next 3 years or so. And we really had to backtrack and rebuild those systems so that the teachers could get a quality of support that they needed. And obviously the program needed so much fine tuning along the way. We've been, iterating every summer, all the time. We're constantly, evolving the program. But we also just had to figure out internally, how do we manage all of these people in a way that honors the experience, honors the educator's time? And I think we're still figuring that out. It's been a real labor of love to kind of find ways to make this thing run on its own without, individuals. And that's an easy thing as a founder. When you can kind of step in all the ways, you become accidentally integral, and that's actually not great for your business model, And so for us to really grow up as an organization, we really had to figure out over these last couple of years, how do we make this successful, no matter who's heading the ship, no matter who's on the team, no matter, so that it's not always dependent on, one person or a couple people, and so we've come a long way. There's still a lot of learning and growth to do. The list is long, but I think I'm really grateful for a team that has a posture of, we lean into learning a lot in a way that, kind of destigmatizes it and normalizes it. And we can pretty often all say like, oh, shoot, that wasn't quite right. Let's try again. And I think for that reason, we've been able to evolve quickly and support teachers better along the way.
That I think it really speaks to you and to your organization that you are also very humble about what you don't know. It's kind of meta, like you're building this entrepreneurial this entrepreneurial company and to help entrepreneurs. And so it's kind of a neat thing where you can go, hey, I got the number one experience of like going, oh, that didn't work, let me pivot, let me do something else. And it's just really interesting. And I think just staying humble and staying honest and open with people, I think just is the key to all of that. And to just be like, sorry, let's try that again.
Yeah, I think you have to be, in particular in entrepreneurship, imposter syndrome is so easy to feel like, oh my gosh, I cannot do this. There's clearly someone else who's more qualified. They're going to know that I don't know what I'm doing. And there's a beauty to leaning in and letting them know you don't know what you're doing. And I think our community has been pretty gracious. I think it's been in part because we try not to show up with like an illusion or a performance of all the things we've had figured out. We say like, this is what we're working on. This is where we're at. And I think as a result, they have a lot of grace. They see a lot of the humanity, and reciprocally, we try to kind of create that culture here. It feels important for learning.
Oh, it's wonderful. I think that's why you've been so successful. That's where you need to be. So what you talked about communities, what are your communities like? How did those just happen organically, or did you purposefully try to set those up so that
They
teachers could have
really,
support?
yeah. They really started organically. By the time I came on, I think outside of San Diego, Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh region specifically was the biggest community. And I think we still are, although there's some that are coming up right behind us. But we also gained partners too. So we have, for example, the Harbor Freight Tools for Schools partnership, which is nationwide, but in their own cohort. That's kind of a specific community for skilled trades. So when we look at communities, we not only look at geographically, but also, for example, our special education community, which might be nationwide versus, specific geographical location and things like that. And it helps us to really find connections among our educators easier that way. So an educator can connect in our community within Pittsburgh, but then if they're a fifth grade teacher, they can also connect with fifth grade teachers across the nation who are also building ed corps, and they can collaborate and they can meet up and they can really learn from each other.
That's awesome. And is that through your platform, or how do they normally connect with each other?
We have a few ways. We do have a list of the educators each year so they can reach out to each other, and that does happen. We have our community meetups. We did a virtual summit last summer, and we do community meetups a couple times a year. Last year, we did a few more of those coffee talks, just because of the situation with the pandemic that we all wanted to connect a little more. So those are our primary ways that we try to connect everybody together.
That's great. It's a tremendous resource for teachers to have. Because again, if you're not doing this for the first time, you're like, oh, I don't know what to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
A little bit of help.
A first-year teacher in Ed Corps looks completely different than a second-year teacher in Ed Corps. It's like they've got their feet wet, they know what they're doing, and the second year, pretty much they take off. So they take off, and things go well in their Ed Corp and branch out from there.
We've had the pleasure of stumbling upon, especially the Pittsburgh area, because I'm close to Pittsburgh, so we've had just great pleasure of stumbling upon many of your students and teams, and they are just, when they talk about what they're doing, they just light up. It's really a really wonderful experience for them to have. So I'm sorry, did you?
Oh, I just said I love that. The work can be really hard. It's important to remember all of, to feel connected. And so I love hearing these things reflected back that our students are,
Yeah, we lost all our money one time because we had a bunch of your teams at our conference in Pittsburgh. And I don't think an adult walked out of there with any money at all.
Perfect. They did a great job.
But some of the coolest stuff. Oh my gosh. I just what they came up with. This one young, I think he was one of your teams, the one with the beer soap.
Oh yeah. I think that was over in Ohio. That is cool. There's so many businesses. Ohio's got a strong presence for entrepreneurship, and then we were at your EntreEd conference with about 10 of our groups, and they were selling some different stuff. But it is amazing to see. And then this last year, Toy, with the pandemic, it was great. We were encouraging people to think more digital downloads or digital products, or services and things that they could do differently rather than just limiting their scope to a physical product, especially when students couldn't really get together to make things that often last year. We had a great experience here in the Pittsburgh region with one of our educators who runs her Ed Corp as a club or after school program, and they went full remote. We're into remote. Each student had little remote office in their home. She put out the equipment for their making into the hands of the students to trust them with the equipment, and everything was made, and she just went and picked things up, or parents would deliver them on her doorstep or whatnot, so they could continue to fulfill orders a year. And that was really fun to see that they got that remote working experience. But yeah, digital products and services were great. We had some podcasts that had started up by some of the different Ed Corp groups out there, and some other digital downloadable kind of products. It was just neat to see the variety happen because of the situation over the past year.
Wow, that is really cool. That's like, I mean, that really showed, I mean, talk about a real world experience that
Totally.
them what could be done even in something when things kind of seemed a little bit hopeless. Wow. So
Adam said he'll be here in about 10 minutes if we want to. That was about 5 minutes ago. So he should be on very shortly to talk about Harbor Freight tools for schools if you want skilled trades.
awesome. Well, so you mentioned you have the classroom ed corps. You also have clubs too that are after school. What does that look like?
It looks pretty similar, right? So I think the one beauty of the after school space is that it's just far more flexible, right? And so from the beginning, we've seen clubs and after school programs kind of latch onto this, or, there have been times where we work with classrooms and maybe the class has to move on or the class ends, but the business wants to continue. So they roll it into a club so that the students can keep going. And so from our end, it doesn't look very different. But what often happens in club settings is that students aren't confined to that, that school period. And so it's like the students are coming in before school, they're coming in at lunch, they're coming in after school, that because it's really driven, they're there by choice. It's really driven by student interest. Oftentimes those businesses can take up a little bit more space and grow a little freer, honestly, because you have more time. BW Creations is a perfect example of that, which Christen was just sharing a bit. That was, the class that started that podcast, and they had everything that went home. That was actually a club. And so we've seen some really successful businesses grown out of clubs.
Yeah, I think a really good target area for us is the out of school time area. Talk about a community. We've had discussions across the nation that, hopefully will support a larger cohort of those kinds of ed corps happening in the out of school time space. And we'll hopefully be here to continue to support those conversations and see those come to fruition.
Yeah, that's such an important time. And everyone's trying to figure out the best way to handle this out of school experiences and get kids more involved in their, more of this experiential learning and things that is outside of kind of the traditional model of school. So, what advice might you both give to a teacher or even a young person that wants to get started with this?
Kristen, you can go first on this one.
Besides, go to the website and apply.
I know.
After that point.
Yeah. I encourage any student, any young person, and their parents and their teachers, but if they have an idea, just don't put it down. Let it flourish. Find ways for that student to investigate and to learn and to think about it and let it have room to get wings. And I think when teachers come into this setting, I think that's probably the most thing that they remark about and are amazed about at first is how much students will latch onto it. And usually it's students they don't expect who will actually just completely latch onto this because it's creative and different than their usual schoolwork. And it doesn't involve worksheets or it doesn't involve lengthy lectures. It's actually doing something. And so I think when we as adults give children space to do that kind of experiential learning and investigation and, becoming very personally involved and engaged in the work they're doing, I think there's just room to flourish and grow. And so that would be my first suggestion as a teacher and a parent is to just allow that space to grow.
I love that. Yeah, it's amazing what they can do when we get out of their way.
And I think this is true both for educators who are working with us, but for anyone starting a business, there's something about just doing it. I think there is so much resistance to the creative process that we all experience. And it sounds so logical, right? Like, well, we can't do that because of timing. We can't do that because we couldn't, we don't have access to these resources. And the reality is, if if there's a teacher who wants to work with us, if they signed up to work with us, there's something in them that actually wants to say yes to the entrepreneurial spirit, yes to the entrepreneurial process. And so along the way, we know that resistance is going to come up, whether you're, even as an entrepreneur, like if you're starting something, and I think this is true for so many people who are sitting on that idea and they're like, oh, I'm going to get started, when I finish, remodeling the garage. I'm going to get started when I change jobs and have more time. Like I'm going to get started tomorrow. And I think there is something about cutting all of the mental clutter, all of the logical resistance that you have towards leaning into uncertainty and just doing it. And I think for a teacher, that means welcoming in that uncertainty of co-creating with your students. I know that it is oftentimes so uncomfortable and out of the scope of what a lot of traditional classrooms can look like. And there's there's endless reasons why, our brains can come up with why we shouldn't do that. And yet we know the data shows, like I think our best pedagogical practices show that like giving students that ownership is worthwhile, it's meaningful, it creates, it deepens engagement, right? And so it's like limiting that, the ability for that resistance to come up and just pulling the trigger, taking this first step, jumping off, once you're there, you'll figure it out. And kind of to Kristen's point, so much of the learning happens when you need it to, right? It's like, oh, now we have to figure out Facebook advertising. And so now we're going to go learn about that. And we're going to go down those rabbit holes because it matters, because we're doing it right now, right? And so all those things that you're like, oh, well, we don't know how to do that. It's actually an amazing opportunity for you and your students to dive in and learn more about that. All those big question marks can be opportunities to learn and co-create together. And we can figure those things out after we get started. So
one of the things that I always am amazed when I talk about EdCorps with educators, and then if the parents are there as well, or parents are involved, is just how much all of them say, I wish I had this when I was younger. And as adults, I've worked with adults in entrepreneurial world as well, and their startups and such. And as adults, it's so quick and easy for us to put up our own barriers, to stop ourselves. It's the believability that, we don't believe we can do it, and we stop ourselves. But as children, they don't have that yet. They're still wanting to explore and believe they can tackle the world. And so, I think that's the greatest thing that I've seen from EdCorps, is that students are able to experience this and see, yes, we made this happen. We can do this. Even if we failed, we learned from it. Now I know in my future, in my career, even if I go on to be an entrepreneur or have a little side business or work for somebody else, that there's this barrier that's been knocked down because I know I've already done this. Like I've done this work and made it happen.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And like that horrible, evil word, that uncertainty word, is very scary for people when they're trying to start something new. And they, and teachers are so good. I mean, teachers do so much and have to be so organized that not knowing, what's going to happen when I let go of this organization has to be a little bit of a hurdle for them. But I mean, I think it's so important. And with students to having the experience of actually starting a business, whether they continue with it or not, it's building that self-efficacy to go, like when they're 30 years old, they might go, yeah, I have this idea. And you know what? I know I can do that because I did that before. I know it's possible. And it's just making those connections and giving them that's another, option. Now it's on the table. It's another career option now. And whether it happens immediately or whether it happens at 40 years old, it's always going to be with them, which is such a cool thing. So this is up first for the EntreEd Talk podcast. This is exciting. So we have a new guest that just popped in. So Adam Mathis. Hi, welcome.
Thank you. I apologize for being late.
No worries, not at all. We're excited that you could join us. So why don't we just, we're kind of all over the place, back up a little bit, and just if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and your background, and tell us, I know we're waiting to hear about Harbor Freight, so I'm excited to hear about your Real World Scholars community and what's going on with all of that. So fire away.
Okay. I don't know how much detail you want about me, but my name is Adam Mathis. I've been with Real World Scholars now for coming up on 4 years. And I manage the Harbor Freight Tools for Schools cohort of classrooms. And I've been around since the beginning of this initiative, which has been really exciting. We support public high school skilled trades classrooms, and the primary like central ed corps experience is the same as it is across all the other cohorts, but for this specific group of classrooms, it's CTE teachers, but more specifically skilled trades teachers, and they differentiate that with the use of tools, power tools, hand tools, fab lab equipment, it's an expectation that classes that we support will use those machines and tools to make the products that they market and sell. And we have everything from wood shop and welding fabrication classrooms to engineering classes. We've had a few kind of interesting outliers, agriculture tech classrooms who've made really great partnerships. We had a class in Chattanooga that an agriculture tech class that they were working with the local national state park, identifying issues that the bat population was having, and alongside the rangers of the park, they were developing these bat boxes for safe hibernation spaces, and that was their product. And so the teacher hadn't really ever used woodworking tools, but she learned herself how to do woodworking and then brought the woodworking into the class, and the students learned all about how to design and build bat boxes, and they were they had a lot of great success that year. So we've had classes that have run the kind of gamut of what I guess a modern sort of skilled trades education class would look like these days, and it's been really interesting to be a part of.
I think that's so great. Now, I have a personal love of career tech ed because I was administrator for career tech high school, so I absolutely love that, and it's such a natural fit because most of those young folks will probably apprentice or go on to some additional trade or educate something, but eventually they're going to probably get a truck and a company and start to build it. And so having that experience now is just going to be so helpful for them in the future. And I love the skilled trades class. I was an engineer once upon a time, so getting a tool in my hand is very exciting.
Yeah, I think I agree. It's a very natural fit for the EdCorps experience. Students traditionally in these types of classes are making things anyway, and now they're finding ways to monetize that, but also to get feedback and hear from customers about what types of things customers want and need, and then they can build that into their production process, and they're getting all of the other aspects of running a business in addition to the building that they were already doing. I think it's a really great fit, and we've seen a lot of really interesting student success stories. And it's from a personal perspective for me, it's similarly to you. I don't have myself an engineering background, but my father is a tradesman, and he has been in construction and real estate, land development all his life, and I've spent a significant amount of my own time when I was younger on job sites and working with various tradespeople, and it's been really cool to be a part of from a personal perspective too.
That's so wonderful. And I mean, I bet it's such a really wonderful option for the community too, to have. I know we did some through some of our skilled trades classes, and it was just like people were lining up because the kids were offering better service than they could get anywhere else.
Yeah, we're seeing a few instances where, especially in some of the smaller communities that we're currently supporting, where the services, the products the students are offering and are really being taken on by the community. We have a class in Wyoming that has, I mean, they're even part of like the local chamber of commerce now. Like they're really well integrated into the community, and some of the students that are coming through the class are looking at it's a very small town of about 1,000 people, and there are empty buildings and businesses that are sort of that haven't had people coming up to sort of take over, and they're the students that are a part of the business and now getting a little bit of entrepreneurial experience, or seeing some of these local businesses and thinking, if I don't leave town, if I don't go off to college, like one of these businesses might be mine someday. They're already like integrating themselves in the community in that way. It's really cool to see.
That's awesome. Well, I'm so glad you were able to pop on and join us. What a great finisher. I love that idea. So career tech teachers, you are not out of this. You get on board for sure. So how can folks, as we wrap up, how can folks find out more about Real World Scholars and EdCore and get involved? And we will put all of this information in our show notes so you won't have to search, folks, very hard for any of this.
Awesome. I would say the first thing to do would be just to check out the website, realworldscholars.org. And the second thing I would encourage is signing up for the newsletter. I think we always have dreams of being more robust in our sharing, but at a minimum, folks want to get involved. We share out all of our application dates and all the most relevant kind of info as to what it looks like to connect with us, collaborate with us, partner with us, use the program, etc. And so I would encourage them to check out that website, sign up for that newsletter, and then be in touch. We are always down to have conversations. And so we have throughout the year, typically, we both have kind of internal EdCorps community meetups, but we try to have some that are also kind of open so that other people can kind of join our conversation. And so those, if someone signs up for the newsletter, they'll also be kind of kept up to date with opportunities to join an EdCorps meetup so that they can either talk to other EdCorps educators or with us.
Awesome.
And I would just add on to that it's not just teachers, but also anyone in the community who's listened to this and thinks this is something great that their community could use, or partners or corporate partners or anything like that. Anyone who's listening who finds it interesting, you'll find all the information you need there at the website as well to learn how to partner with us.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining me today. This has been so wonderful. And thank you, Christen, for organizing everything on your end and getting everyone on here. I'm really excited to have met y'all, and I knew Christen, but I'm excited to have met you, Elyse, and Adam as well. So I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us, Toy. This was fun.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Hopefully you can be on again at episode 205.
That'd be great.
Maybe sooner.
Centennial check-in. I like it.
Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
You
You
too.
too.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.